My name is Pearce. I am the Chief Marketing Officer for a company called Milestones, and we are a consumer-facing product for homeowners to manage their home, all things home. So while we are free for consumers, we are given to consumers by the real estate industry. So our clients and customers are real estate agents and brokers, mortgage professionals, title professionals, and basically that's kind of where we focus now. But you can imagine there's all kinds of various other industries that could potentially sell into that space. So I have been in the real estate and property technology space for about 15 years, and digital marketing and advertising for about 7 years before that. So I guess I'm an old school digital marketer at heart.
And just before we jump into the main meat of the conversation as far as positioning messaging challenges, I want to just get a little more context because I think it's interesting what you just said about, you have like the B2C component of this, right, which is the homeowners, but it's essentially your primary client as far as how this is initially distributed is through real estate agents or title or anything like that. Do I have that correctly? So you're primarily focused
Correct.
on that audience, correct?
Yes, we are a B2B to C company
Mm,
for all intents and purposes. Our product serves both the consumer on one
mm,
end, and the real estate professional has their own piece of our platform for managing their past clients and homeowners as well. So historically, I've been in the space, and I think you'd see a lot of times in the property tech space that I'm in. A lot of it is B2B to C, right? You're
mm, mm,
facilitating something for a real estate professional to do their job better, to communicate easier, to market to their clients or whatever that might be. And it may even be something that's just an operational tool set, but on the other end typically is something a consumer's interacting with.
mm.
That could be a website or even signing a document or something like that, right? So there's many flavors of that, but from my world, for the most part, I would consider myself a B2B marketer by day, but we do a lot of consumer marketing as well through the industry.
Got it. And just if I were painting it in broad strokes, would you say, because I just want to make sure I have my head around the value prop in general, is like, is this a tool that allows real estate professionals to be able to create stronger long-term relationships with these clients? Is that kind of like the value prop on their end?
Yeah, yeah. So if you think about it from the industry perspective, and this is, deep real estate kind of data, if you will, only about 16% of real estate agents or realtors, according to the National Association of Realtors, only about 16% of them make their money off of repeat business.
Mm,
And so in a world where you've got a 7 to 10 year sales cycle,
mm,
it's very difficult for real estate professionals to maintain and provide value in between such a long sales cycle. And without getting into the weeds too much, typically what we see is they're very transaction focused. So it's generate lead, nurture lead,
mm,
close deal, repeat as many times as you can, as fast as you can for as many people as possible. That can be very lucrative,
mm.
but what happens is the long-term client relationship falls off because that real estate professional is so focused on the next deal, that long-term relationship building gets relegated to push marketing from a CRM and marketing automation suite that mostly goes to spam,
Mm.
and like fridge magnets and direct mail and things like that. That is not relationship building. And so what Milestones does is we fill the gap in between transactions, and so we are a consumer facing tool for homeowners to manage their home, monitor home value and equity, store cloud, documents in the cloud. We have kind of like what we would call an Angie's List built into it. So they got one place to manage their home, monitor their equity, reach out to service providers, look for property. And during that time, the real estate professional is there and branded throughout the entire experience. We're sending them emails to come back in and check their equity, to come in and maintain their home with various tasks and things they need to do to make sure that the home doesn't fall apart. And so the kind of byproduct is that the real estate professional is seen as that trusted advisor in between, right? They're able to solve problems and do things at scale in between transactions. The benefit and the payoff is repeat business when they're ready to transact again, or hopefully they're telling their friends and family, oh my gosh, this mortgage provider, this real estate agent, they not only handheld me through this really thorny transaction, but they've been there with me providing value for the past 5 years. I love them, right? That's the goal. That's what we're trying to solve for the industry.
That's actually really quite brilliant, because as I was mentioning to you yesterday when we first had a little chat, I have, say a few years of experience both as a commercial real estate investor on multi-property units and also on the agency side. And, that has always been the hardest thing, because like the fridge magnet just kind of gave me like a flashback, right? And like this, they might do a closing gift and then they send maybe a follow-up card, or maybe they send birthday cards, but most of them don't. It's kind of, for me, I never understood that. Like I bought a house years ago in Westchester County around New York City. And I never heard from the agent again. We had to sell it a year later.
Exactly.
And she contacted me like angry that I didn't talk to her
Yes.
first.
And if you think about it, it is the classic case. So why should I remember you? What have you done for me lately? During the transaction, you're their best friend, right? And then they're gone. And that is just the reality of it. And it's not just that they're bad at long-term relationship building and marketing to people in between transactions. People move, people go out of the business. Everybody knows somebody that becomes a realtor every year, right? And so it's there's a little bit that chips away at it, but for the most part, the data says real estate and mortgage professionals are really, really bad at long-term relationship building. And so we're trying to help them solve that problem, and in the process, give homeowners a way to actually think about their home in a different way. A home has 150 different systems in it on average. Most people don't know how to do things around the home to fix it. They're not all DIY kind of general contractors. Finding general contractors, finding plumbers, that's difficult, right? You're going through Google and Yelp and Angie's List. When the real estate professional is the one that has all those relationships already, they're just used to being so focused in a transaction period that they're not extending that value prop out into the part when the homeowner gets the keys, the real estate agent's job is done, but the real hard part for the homeowner is just beginning, right? So we're trying to help them bridge that gap, to show that value, to extend that value prop out at scale, for thousands of people over a very long period of time. And if you build that kind of almost a flywheel up, it should start to tip over, where you don't have to rely so much on getting new hot leads that are ready to buy. You're just constantly in the flow with your past clients that already know, like, and trust you, right? And so your narrative changes, and you're able to kind of really rely more on the sphere and the database that you've already built. So that's our silly romantic vision of it, at least.
No, I like it. It's not silly at all. And I think it's a great case study for, what we talk about on this podcast in general, which is the positioning / messaging, which I know are not the same thing, but I just kind of lump them together because they're so related to each other, in how important it is to truly understand your customer, right? Because it's so we just talk about it all the time. But as marketers, it's very easy to fall into the trap of thinking you understand their world. And I think this is such a great example of, everything you're talking about are things that I'm familiar with my, having been involved in that. So, but, if somebody's selling something to real estate agents, or let's say they're selling to salespeople or whatever, if they're not really understanding that world, it's too easy to assume they understand what they go through, assume they understand where the holes in their own process are. And so I didn't want to go off too much on a tangent for myself on that, because I could talk about this particular for an hour.
I'll tell you this, speaking, I've been thinking about this a lot lately, that, and I read a stat last week. There's a Gallup poll that recently came out that they said 78% of American consumers right now think it's a bad time to buy a house. That's the lowest it's ever been, apparently. And they're like 40 years they've been tracking this or surveying people on this. Okay. So our model, or our mantra right now is like, are you speaking to modern homeowners or consumers, American consumers, in the narrative of today's market, right? Are you ready to buy or sell? It's not going to work. There's no inventory. So let's think about the copy, right? What would the messaging be? Like, you can't say it's a great time to refinance. Nope, it's not. Right? Mortgage professionals, like, rates are through the roof. Nobody's moving. Inventory is very, very low. Prices are still very, very high. And nobody wants to trade in their mortgage that they've got at 2 to 3%. And so it's, what do? You have to
Mm,
speak to them in a narrative that is like, where we say is, let's help make the most of the home that you are already living in and clearly not moving from. So
mm,
let's help build wealth. Let's help repair credit. Let's do a remodel project. Let's do other things that are around the home you're already in, so that when you are ready to move, when life presents something that forces you to move, when the market changes, when rates come down, whatever those things are, you're ready to go. And I'm positioned there to be with you. But if you look at the past 10 years, real estate and mortgage marketing has been around, what's my home worth? Let's do a refi. What are today's rates? Come in and look at property, and I'm going to squeeze you for your information, and then I'm going to push a bunch of marketing at you. Those things, in my opinion, now from the narrative you're trying to put out there and the positioning and the messaging you're putting out to your client base or your potential client base, that seems very, I won't say obtuse. I don't know what the right word is, but it doesn't fit the narrative we're living in, right? And so
yeah.
if you're trying to build trust, that's not the way you're going to do it. That kind of marketing is not going to work in this year, right? And maybe that changes again next year, but for the foreseeable future, you need a different narrative. We provide the narrative and the tool set to fit that,
Mm,
right?
mm,
So they kind of go hand in hand. If you want to get into the mindset of a trusted advisor, a long-time advisor for your clients, your push marketing CRM kind of technology isn't going to do that.
mm-hmm.
You need something that your consumers can come back into and interact with. So you got to have both. And that's where we're, as we kind of talked about yesterday, it's been a challenge because we're
Mm,
bringing this new thing to market. That's a new category. It's a new type of technology. It's a new way that we have to almost retrain our audience to think differently about how
mm-hmm.
they want to do business or how they should be doing business, right? And so, kind of coming back to, like, as a B2B marketer, as a product marketer, as positioning, messaging, that's been an uphill battle. It's fun. I mean, that's kind of why I signed on to do this, was to try to carry that torch for a new
Yeah.
category. But we do feel that is the future of where things are going in the industry.
Yeah, and to kind of like follow that thread a little bit, and I want to dive more into like the challenges of developing that new category and retraining the audience and their mindset. But it relates to one thing I always noticed with real estate, and I'm going to say on the agency side, on the realtor side, not specifically on the,
Sure.
financing. What I noticed is, for the most part, their approach to marketing or messaging or whatever you want to call it was them, their image, their headshot. Maybe it was their awesome car, right? Maybe it was their dog or something. It was like, here, look at me, I'm a real person and I care, and that's great. Like, it's very much
Yeah.
a personality play, right? But what was always lacking in so many of the examples that I saw was anything beyond that. So they were all passionate about real estate. They were all passionate about how, like, it was all the same stuff. But
Yeah.
this, what you're talking about, and I could speak again from that experience of seeing, like, what you're talking about is coming in and saying, wait a minute, if you're going to be able to maintain a long-term relationship with people that's going to not only lead to repeat business in the future, which is might be years and years, but it's also going to hopefully in the
Yep.
meantime create referrals, which is really the golden kind of, that's what you want to go for.
Yep.
That, from my experience, is absolutely a new concept for a lot of real estate agents, because what they've been trained is, got to get your image out there, you got to go out and network, which is all fine. But
Yeah.
I think one thing that's interesting about this is how we kind of compare this even to B2B SaaS, right? So, or even to like your more traditional technology companies, that a lot of it sometimes can be kind of a beauty contest, right? Like, we are so
Mm-hmm.
different
Mm-hmm.
because of this, but they kind of forget about, like, in the specifics of why it matters to the customer,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
It's like feature, 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 feature.
Yeah, exactly.
But
And if
why?
you did
Right.
that, I imagine if you went with a feature push, with a data dump, with that audience of let's say just realtors right now, just to keep it about like brokers and
Sure.
that they, for the most part, they wouldn't care, right? I mean, I'm guessing, but if it
No.
was just like,
What is it? What's in it for me?
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
All they want to hear is it going to send me leads?
mm,
Is it going to help me make more money?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Right.
yeah,
And it's not just real estate agents. Real estate agents are pretty easy to pick on. But they hate change, right? And most people, if they're in a business and they're making money already, they don't want to change it. Nobody likes change, right?
Yeah.
But the market's kind of forcing everybody's hand right now, right? You have to adapt to this market because there's only a very small set of people that are doing any transactions, and the only reason they're doing it is because they have to, from a consumer side, right? Nobody's moving because they want to right now. It's just not financially viable, and for the most part, I'm broad strokes, right?
No, it's really,
and so
there's nothing for sale compared to a decade ago or more,
exactly,
you know.
exactly, and prices are still very high, and mortgage rates are high, and so people are staying put. And so, what do you have to adapt, because for the past 10 years, and I'm kind of guilty. I kind of helped create this with the company I was with for many years before this. It's been generate a bunch of leads online, right? They go to look at Zillow, they go to look at a website, they look at enough, they either fill something out, they get squeezed for something, it goes into a database, they go into 5 or 6 different realtor CRMs, and it's whoever can get there the fastest. The data says that people, for the most part, are going to work with the first agent that contacts them. That's, of the people meeting agents online. But that strategy and those tactics are just simply not very effective in this market, right? People are not, they may be looking at property, but they're not moving, they're not buying, they're very aspirational. So what other tool set can you give them? Well, most of them are already homeowners, right? There's first-time home buyers for sure, and we have a tool set for that, but we allow them to have a different conversation of saying, I know you're not going to be moving right now, but here's what I'm going to do for you. I'm going to set you up on Milestones. It's called a homeowner hub. A home ownership hub is what we call it. And everything you need is going to be right there. You're going to get emails telling you what you need to do for updating your home. You're going to monitor your equity. You can store your documents in there. I'm one click away. You can chat with me. I'm out, right? I don't have to be pushy, and it helps alleviate that. A lot of times in our industry, you have agents that are like, yeah, I've got 500 people in my database. I don't know what to say to them. They're not going to be moving. I know they're not. So what am I going to call them? And how's the weather? What are you doing? Yeah, you probably still should be just checking in. That's what relationship building is about. But hey, now you got a tool set and something you can give them of value, right? And then obviously on the other end, we have the data. Once they start bringing the people in, we can start surfacing insights to say, this person just engaged with a plumber. Maybe check in with them. What's going on?
If there's a problem,
right?
Yeah.
If there's a problem, hey, this person's reading articles. We've got a big article knowledge base of things that could impact home ownership or moving. And it's like, this person's all of a sudden reading a lot of articles on having a baby or how adding another room for if your family's growing, like ding, 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 right?
Wow.
So it's not just, there's data that can be harvested from tools like ours that are not just around, are they looking at property or are they not looking at property? What about all the other rich things in there? And then I guess kind of like we're saying, like from a messaging standpoint, now you've got a whole bunch of other things that you can talk to them about, you can email them about, you can put in your social media, right? That is around all the things that happen in between transactions that are indicative of renovating, refinancing, maybe moving, somebody going to college, like whatever those things are, tapping into home equity. I think if people just need to kind of see, if you step back and think more big picture, a little more broad, what a system like ours and the data that you can get from it allows you to do from your marketing, from your positioning perspective as a salesperson. Now you move into more of an advisor, a long-term kind of advisor for wealth, right? And I guess, how they say, date the rate, marry the home. You've probably heard that, right? In the mortgage world, there's like, well, look, we can always refi later, but let's get you in this home. You can be there 20 years, 10 years, whatever. We can always refi later. Kind of look at it like, date the house, marry the client, right? That client's going to have multiple homes. Like, focus on that relationship, and then your narrative, your marketing, your positioning, all of that emanates from there, as opposed to focusing on that transaction. Right, which is finite, and there's a bunch of transactions, great, but what about one client with multiple transactions over 25 years? So, and you do that with 500 different people,
At scale. Yeah. And that,
at
and just
scale.
to create a little extra context for anybody listening, that's not like maybe you haven't bought a house in a while or you haven't been in that industry. One of the things that, and correct me if I'm off on this, but my perception of this is 20 years ago, approximately 15, 20 years ago, realtors had the monopoly on listings, essentially on access to information. That was the whole thing, right? And that way there was a thing called MLS, multiple listing service, which, and then
Yep.
was it 15, 20 years ago, whatever, approximately 20. It feels like that's when you had Zillow come up and you had like, they were
Yeah. It's
basically breaking down that wall, right? And there
Yep.
was
Yeah.
lawsuits and
2007, 8 is when it started shifting online.
yeah, yeah. It's important to understand in this conversation for people listening. This is the context we're talking about, right? So we're talking about people that might have been in the business 25 years ago, or for the last 40 years, or whatever it is, who really just controlled all the information. And like most industries, the internet changed everything, right? And now having
Yep.
access to listings means nothing because we can all go on any one of these things. It doesn't do anything for you. So I just want to kind of set that up and just a little bit more context for people. And then I wanted to dive
Yeah.
into like the challenges here. You kind of touched on a few of them, right? So there's new category. You have to retrain this audience to think differently. I know I've seen firsthand what happens with the chasing Zillow leads and now always having to have their phone available. And it's even under good circumstances and healthy markets, that's a pretty rough way to make a living. You know what I mean? Where you're just
Yeah.
tethered
Yes.
and then somebody will just like not show up. I mean, it's rough, you know. So tell me a
It's
little
rough.
bit about like what's been you've been now with this with Milestones for how long approximately?
We just came to market last summer, just about a
Got
year.
it. Okay, so
Yeah.
this is a brand new thing. Is it in the same?
Yep.
Is it essentially the same iteration as it was at the beginning? Was there a pivot? Like is it always been this kind of thing?
No. So long story short, our CEO, a guy named Dustin Gray, had been building kind of the V1 of Milestones for about 2 years prior to last summer,
Mm,
and in stealth mode.
mm,
I came on board in October of 21 as a fractional marketing consultant, just to kind of help along the way. And we started slowly getting the product really ready to come to market. We closed a Series A last May,
mm,
and started bringing in a full-time team and outside of the product team, the development team. And so we brought in a bunch of seasoned industry vets from the prop tech and real estate world and brought this thing to market, for all intents and purposes last July, basically.
mm.
And so it certainly was a fully baked product, but we have already iterated substantially since then, as you can imagine. So,
Yeah.
at heart, we are a technology company. We're a software company with the predominantly engineers and developers. But yeah,
So what would you say, you already touched on a little bit, that kind of retraining the mentality. So let's talk a little bit about some of the
yeah,
challenges in this. And again, I kind of throw positioning and messaging in the same bucket for these conversations because they relate to each other so closely and they're kind of this,
yeah,
it's a loop, right? You're kind of going through this
yeah,
positioning exercises and the messaging kind of evolves from that. So,
yeah. I mean, as you know, like people need to put things into a familiar box, right?
mm,
They're like, oh, well, Milestones is a CRM. No, we have
mm,
some CRM components. Oh, well, Milestones is a property search tool. No, but yes, we do have property search. Oh, it's cloud-based document storage. Yes, we have that too. Oh, it's a communication platform. Yes, we have email, we have chat. Right? Yes, it's a service provider marketplace. It's a place to monitor equity. We consider it almost more of an operating system for your home. That's also that's a very difficult thing to explain as well. It's like this phone has an operating system, but I don't use the map, Apple Maps. I use Google Maps, right? So I don't use various pieces of it. I've made it my own thing. Milestones is a bit like that as well. You can use the whole suite, or you can use pieces of it. You can tap into it in a way that makes sense for your specific business, and it really depends on who we're talking to. So we've got messaging. We have to like arm the agents and mortgage providers with materials to explain this to their customers. We
mm,
have to arm the brokers and companies that buy our product to get their trainers to train their agents on it. We have
mm-hmm,
to arm, the whether it's a mortgage provider or a real estate provider or a title professional potentially with a different set of collateral to explain how this product works for them. And then at the big picture, we're trying to explain to the industry at large, this is why we're different. This is a different philosophy. This is a different approach. And I like to say, our thing is, you're less of a transaction agent now, you're a trusted advisor. So even if you wanted to be the more of the trusted advisor 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 2 years ago, the tool set didn't exist to facilitate the ability to do that at scale, because modern real estate and property technology of the last 10 to 15 years is built to generate leads and close deals. And then do that is right. That's what we were talking about earlier. That ignores the whole 95% of the time people are just living in the home. Right. And so that, again, we come back to, that's why nobody's calling their real estate agent when the tree falls on the roof or the pipes break, or they're not getting the amount of referrals and repeat business they want, because they haven't done anything for those people in that time. They're not providing value when they absolutely could. They're just so focused on transactions that they're ignoring that piece of it, right? And so to bring that message out, I was a little concerned leading up to going to market, because the market was still hot, and people are like, I'm doing fine, I'm closing deals without even trying, call me later. Now it's a little easier to get in that narrative, because all those things you were doing have really slowed down. So what are you doing now to build your business, plant seeds for the future now, so that when they are ready to go again, you're the one they think about? Because the fridge magnet isn't going to do it, right? That isn't providing value. Maybe if the fridge magnet had a QR code that sent them back into their Milestones hub, maybe something like that.
There you go. There's
right?
a new idea. Yeah.
It's thinking differently. And there's really no better time. You either get out of the industry or you weather this storm and you pivot and do things in a different way. When we come out on the other side of this, I feel that, and again, this is just more of a projection, that consumers are going to think differently. The world will have moved in a different direction, and you need to be poised to look less like a sales agent and more like a long-term advisor for all things home. And that means that your conversations are not just centered around, are you ready to buy or sell? It's, how can I help you maintain, manage, and build wealth in the largest asset that you have?
And let's chat a little bit about the range of responses. And I don't mean like, conversion rates, but I mean, like, I imagine it's on a spectrum, right? On one end, you have maybe people we would like even call early adopters, right? The people that are relatively like me, they're really comfortable with the tech side of this business, right? They were the ones that adopted Zillow, and they were the ones that did that. So they're always looking for these types of tools to help differentiate them. And then again, I'm going to guess on the far side of that spectrum, on the other side, you have people that have been in the business for a long time, or they're kind of like not really in the technology side, and they're going with the relationship approach to the old school networking, which is fine. And I say, I almost cringe when I said old school, because I don't like using that term, because there's a lot of good things that are old school, right?
100%.
Yeah. So like, tell me a little bit about what that response has been as far as just feedback and things that they've kind of pushed back about or really loved about it.
Yeah. So I'm making some notes here, so don't forget. So let's start with the kind of early adopters, the ones on this side of the bell curve. I don't know how that looks on the screen, but on the front side of the bell curve, right? You're 100% right. They adopted technology 15 years ago, and they made the shift. A lot of people that made that jump, they have printed money in the last decade because they really embraced it, and they embraced new models and operating models around how to capture a lot of demand online and turn that into transactions. What they're seeing now is those folks have amassed very large databases of past clients, and they've done a really poor job of monetizing and extracting more revenue out of them. We come in and say, you're already way ahead of the game. We're going to give you a tool set that isn't just this push marketing kind of CRM email push set, but it's an actual thing your customers, your past clients will want to come back and interact with. And in the process, you're going to get all this rich information that's going to give your agents and we also allow you to bring in, say, for a brokerage that also has a mortgage company, a title company, maybe home warranty or insurance. We bring all that into the hub as well. So when the consumer logs in, they see, oh, they've got this whole suite of things that I can do. And so we're giving, those are the ones that see companies like Zillow or Rocket, for example, as a competitor, in the sense that if Zillow or Rocket captures your information, they're not just going to try to sell you one thing, right? They're going to try to get you to do your mortgage with them. They're going to try to get some insurance on it. They're going to try to do the broker the deal. That they're bundling all these services together, and that's what consumers are starting to expect. And so the people that are seeing that, and they're seeing their businesses potentially come up against that, why can't you bundle your services? Why can't you do these things? We're giving them a way to capture more of that revenue with the business they've already got and with any new leads that are coming in the door. So they get it. But again, that's a small fraction of people, right? And I guess on the other side, with the more laggard side, which would be old school, I guess, the messaging there is, you're actually the ones that are already doing this in many. You've built relationships. You've done a great job of building relationships. Now we're going to help you scale that, because you can only do so many phone calls. You can only pop by so many homes, right? So the true old school relationship kind of sphere driven real estate professional, they're not going to be able to do that to 10,000 people or 1,000 people, right? So it's a smaller, addressable market, if you will, for them individually. We help them scale that out. But again, with real estate, and I think with anything I've seen over the years, there's a lot of excitement, potentially from the top. Somebody gets it. And once you start trying to proliferate down into the ranks, especially in a world of independent contractors, it's very hard to get adoption, right? And so one of our challenges from my perspective, and more of a communications and a marketing perspective, is we're preaching this from the mountaintops of this new thing and this new way of doing things. But then we also have to get down into the weeds with them to say, this is why, and this is how, right? And then use this thing that, they're used to using the technology that did things the way they've been doing it, right? We're not that technology. We're something different. Getting agents to adopt technology is very difficult. So especially, and I kind of liken it to, and if you're familiar with SEO at all, and like content marketing, I assume.
Yeah, absolutely.
People, they want to be number one on Google, no matter what, like, of course.
Yeah, if it's easy.
And I used to be an SEO. So I used to sell SEO and do SEO for people many years ago. It was like, oh, well, that's going to take 16, 18, 24 months, but it will work. They will get 6 months into it and just see the money going out, but no return. And most people bail before it actually started to tip over, right?
Yeah.
For those folks, I'd say, well, then you just need to put your money into paid advertising and generate leads and do it that way, right? And maybe the SEO catches up. We're kind of the same thing. It's like, they're like, but I'm not going to close deals immediately with your product. Well, nobody's closing deals right now anyway. So we'll strike that from the ejection list. But this is a long-term play. Plant those seeds now, and it will tip over, right? Quit going after our CEO's like, quit going after the needle when you've got the whole haystack right in front of you. You just got to give it the patience and the time for it to build up enough momentum to do it. And so we're not only fighting just the general adoption of technology kind of pushback, it's that this is going to take some time for it to really start to work. But what better time to do it than now, when things the old way and the way you were doing things, and deals have dried up anyway. So why not try something different that in 6 months, in 12 months, will start really reaping those rewards?
And how has the response been to that? Like, you're kind of putting this line in the sand and saying, hey, here's the reality of the situation. I imagine there's people that fall on both sides of that, right? Some people
both sides.
It's been
it's been hit or miss. You're not going to lie, but that's life. That is startup world, right? I mean, and especially when you're trying to carry the torch and do something a little bit different. What we're looking for, and again, we just came to market 10 months ago. We're starting to be able to see some data that it is working for people, right? And in our industry, you show a few people that are kind of influencers in the marketplace, and you show them, evangelize the fact that it's working for them, everybody will follow.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
so it's just a matter of time, and we're almost at that point where it's starting to tip. And even in the world of the kind of lead gen, closed deal world, you turn on a website, start generating leads in our industry, don't even think about making any deals for 6 to 9 months,
Yeah.
right? That's just how it
Yeah.
works. It's not like you're selling mugs or paper or something, or even cars, right? It's a whole different animal. And so there has to be a lot of patience and runway with real estate and mortgage. It's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah, and to kind of go back and put the finer focus on, again, what we're talking about here, not to overgeneralize it, but sticking with the people on the realtor side. People are getting into this, they're private contractors or independents or whatever you want to call it, right? They work for larger brokerages, so they're under that banner, right? You have to work for an actual broker's like, depending on the state. And they're generally not thinking in terms of, yes, they want to be successful long term, like everybody, but it's a lot of short term thinking. How can I get my first client? How can I get my first 10 clients, right?
Yeah.
They're not as worried about, well, in a year, because right now they need a client. At the same time, it's the kind of business, as you just mentioned, that does have these really ridiculously long, not only initial sales cycles of finding a house and finding, so it is by nature a long sales cycle
100%.
driven by people who really want a short sales cycle.
Yeah, and I do want to clarify that I totally get it. We're not telling you don't try to get transactions now.
Yes. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know you
Yeah.
have to
Get
pay
them.
pay your
Yeah.
bills
Get
and make
them.
a living.
Talk to your neighbors.
Absolutely,
Talk to everybody you know, and definitely do that. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
But here's a product that is something of value for everyone, no
Mm,
matter where they are in the journey, right? It's a homeowner that is just bought, and they're 10 years out. Great, plant that seed and move on. The system will take care of the rest. Maybe somebody that is ready to go right now. Great, and everything in between, right?
mm,
So that's kind of the difference, and that is the narrative we're pushing it. And I do always try to caution and catch myself and saying, I'm not saying that I don't want you to try to get deals now. I'm just
totally.
asking you to, like, let's think a little bit differently
Yeah.
about how we're going to do this. And the payoff down the road is your it's kind of an inverse effect. You're weaning yourself off the need for this top of the funnel lead gen
Mm,
kind of rat race
mm,
to get to the point where my database is doing enough for me that that's only something I need if I want to grow my business or bring on a team member or something like that, right? That
mm,
I'm moving to a point of, I was actually just writing about this week. We're building the kind of Warren Buffett, kind of like, you're building a moat around the people you've done business with.
yeah.
Who,
Mm,
what better, kind of future business plan than the people that you've already sold a $500,000 house to, that know, like, and trust you,
yeah.
right? Like, we're saying build those relationships, and it will pay dividends down the road. And again, here's the tool set to facilitate that and scale that over time. And from a brokerage perspective, the narrative is also, if you have mortgage and real estate brokerage and title and home warranty or homeowners insurance, some of those things can actually generate revenue between transactions. So
Mm.
real estate brokerage will not, obviously,
They get
but
referral fees and stuff like that, right? Yeah.
well, or homeowners insurance resets every year, right?
Mm,
Well, you know that if they bought from somebody else 12 months ago, or 9 months ago, let's start marketing to them and generate some other revenue in between. That the real estate piece is a well, it's not a loss leader per se, but
mm,
it is bringing in opportunities for other things around it. A refi, maybe at some point, a home equity line of credit, right? An insurance play, or a warranty, a home warranty, right? Or a lot of people nowadays have their own like contractors and
mm,
like those kinds of things. That real estate is just a piece of a larger business play. And again, we're a platform that you can bring all your ancillary businesses into as well. So we're trying to say to the industry, don't think so myopically, right?
mm.
Don't think so much of a silo, that this is all one thing. And this tool set allows you to expose your other businesses to people all the time. And so, again, it has been a challenge, right? We are
Mm,
selling a big product to multiple different verticals within the same industry. We're focusing on consumer marketing, or how to help our people, our users, market to their consumers. And at the same time, we're trying to teach them about something brand new across the board. And so it has been a challenge, but it's starting to work.
that's but that's the fun part, right? If it wasn't a challenge, it would be boring, and
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, let's frame this a little bit for people listening. So I think that most people can relate to the challenge. The specifically thinking about, let's frame it for a second for somebody who's in the B2B marketing space. It could be technology, SaaS, whatever. But essentially, they're selling something that has a similar aspect of it. It's a long-term investment. And we're living
Yep.
in this world, and have for a long time, of quarterly and monthly metrics and KPIs, and everybody's so focused on the next 3 weeks, which is fine. But when you talk to them about, and over 2 years, you could have this, it's just like whoosh right over there, because they're like, that's great, but I'm not even going to be at this company in 2 years, right? I think that's
That's
another thing now, right? It's like, oh, great.
let's not
So
go down that path.
yeah, so I'm going to invest in all this. I'm going to put my neck in the line to bring on this platform or whatever. And in 18 months, when they fire me anyway for something else, I'm
Yeah,
being
yeah.
snarky about it. But it's like, that's kind of what we're dealing with. So somebody listening who's selling something, that has that same kind of challenge of the time frame and the payoff. Let's just start talking about like advice you can share as we start to wrap up. Like, maybe specific approaches that have worked for you, tactics, anything you want to share that people listening can be like, oh, that's an interesting thing I'd like to try that.
Yeah, I mean, the standard things, like we focus primarily our digital marketing on LinkedIn, right? That's where our decision makers are,
Hmm.
right? We've done some other channels and whatnot just because I feel like we need to, but that kind of marketing, B2B marketing, your typical channels, white papers, LinkedIn, podcasts, like this kind of stuff, right?
Hmm.
Um, for us also, and this, I don't think it's necessarily unique to us, but um, in-person conferences and events are also critical for our world. It's a relationship-based world. Being in front of people, sitting on panels, pressing palms, schmoozing at the after parties, like all of that is critical in our world as well.
Hmm.
Especially if you're in a lot of B2B worlds, they're pretty insular, right? Like my little prop tech world is not very big. We know each other, especially you've been in it for as long as a lot of us have, right? You've worked at different companies and you know people. That's critical as well. Um, I think organizations, finding those like working with the National Association of Realtors, working with the Mortgage Bankers Association, working with the various realtor and MLS associations, right? That those are, as you said, some of them are still kind of gatekeepers to this world. Like
Sure.
and again, this is not unique to real estate. It's if you're in B2B, you're there are organizations and nonprofits and co-ops and all these things and collaboratives that are in all of these worlds. It's being a part of all of those as well. And so that's sponsoring things, participating, like I said, in events and panels and hosting things, providing content for free, um, all of those things. And then, what we've done, I mean, you can see it on our blog over the last year, is in the process, you amass a whole bunch of great content that then becomes stuff that you can use in all kinds of different ways, whether it's email marketing, social media marketing, lead capture for, a white paper or something like that. But you don't just, you've got to create that. You've got to build it over time. And what I've found is you don't have to just start by manufacturing all of this stuff, like much like we're just talking about. If I look back at where we were a year ago and now, it's like, well, what am I going to send out for email over the next couple of weeks? Well, I've got a whole treasure trove of things that we can lean on now. And so you build up that arsenal of collateral. It just takes some time as well. You're not going to have it all from day one. And what I've also found over the years, and again this year as well, a lot of times, go ahead and take the first 6 months. Your budget is going to be on paid advertising. You've got to build some awareness out there. And then we're going to taper that off as we start to have some of the more organic things available to us, and some brand recognition, some name recognition, where it doesn't become so critical that, we've already got, we got 1,000 people that follow us on LinkedIn now. So we've got a little bit of spark under there that we can start to use. I think a lot of times people are afraid to do paid advertising online and sponsorships and things like that, but they work. It's just a matter of putting them in the right place. And then, in my opinion, knowing when to kind of not necessarily taper them off, but follow, set up your tracking infrastructure so that you know what's working and what's not. And then once you 6 months down the road, you can really allocate your time, energy, money where it's actually working for you.
So to wrap up, I want to ask, we talked a little bit before about the kind of spectrum of customer type. On one hand, you have like what we call the early adopters in that industry, and then the far side would be the people that are really just like the most technology averse. How have you approached, the ICP component, the ideal customer profile? Are you focusing on one end of that to start? Like, how are you kind of allocating your focus with that?
Yeah. Without giving away too much, I guess,
Yeah.
trial and error, you
Yeah.
know, I mean, like that, it comes down to, again, I'm not averse or new to the startup world.
Mm,
You're going to make mistakes. You're going to have a lot of twists and turns, and the market kind of slapped us in the face as well. Right. So,
yes. Yeah.
in the sense the market just stopped. And in our world, people stopped buying everything,
Yeah.
our customers or our customer targets. So, in many regards, it's like, you can see it's like, well, we're going to go after this. We're going to sell it in. We're going to sit back and see if they're using it and see if it's working for them. And you're doing that kind of customer feedback loop, standard stuff. And if they're not liking it, if they're not adopting, if they're not, what are those reasons? Do we pivot and go harder for that, or do we try to go after a different audience? Do we, you know, for us, again, don't want to give away too much, but
Mm,
we decided that we forged some partnerships starting last fall, and then we actually just closed another one where, let's go after some one-to-many kind of relationships. So we formed a
mm,
partnership with the California Association of Realtors, which opened up 200,000 agents to our platform. That's a
yeah.
lot different than going after, independent real estate brokerages or teams at 25 to 100 person a clip, right? Um, and then, but then that's incumbent on us to bring them into the platform and then kind of upsell them down the road.
Mm,
A different way of doing business. We just signed a partnership with the Miami Association of Realtors. They have 60,000 plus members as
wow.
well. So you can create these partnerships by going after a small subset of a target at the top, but you're opening up, vast pool of users down below that. And then it's incumbent on us again to market to those users, tell them about how awesome the product is, get them to actually try it, and then ultimately get them to pay for it. Right. So, that is a challenge, right? But at the same time, we're also selling to brokerage, we're selling to
Mm,
mortgage providers, we're selling to title companies. Um, so again, we have many flavors, but we're moving fast, we're breaking things, we're doing all the all the startup stuff you're supposed to do. And it's exciting, and we will continue to kind of twist and turn our way through this and ride the wave of the market at the same time.